One of the things that we're hearing, is AI going to take our jobs?
So embedded AI has been part of what we do for a long time and, well, a good few years. On the Gen AI space, which is more so 2.5 years commercially available, that I think is going to have a much more transformative impact on work. It will fundamentally either change or completely take over activities and tasks that people are performing. The flip side to that, though, is it will force us as a workforce, as individuals, as humans, to play in a different space. I think it will unleash and force us to be much more focused on creativity, collaboration, human interaction, some more innovative ideas, etc., which we continue to leverage Gen AI to help us drive that. But I think that's the space we're going to play in. So fundamentally, I don't think it will take over jobs and, we will all be in a sort of catastrophic situation.
Stuart, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well. Good. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for getting through the snow and the rain.
Our first for the season.
I think that's the first time it snowed this year, right?
It has.
It didn't settle, though. I was thinking, my daughter's probably thinking, please let the snow settle.
Well, my daughter's in Oxford, so she
probably has settled.
She sent a pic this morning as she got up.
Oh, really?
Snow settled, very picture postcard kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't really get that in London. It just sort of melts and then goes into slush. Not the most glamorous way. Well, how you been, first and foremost?
Very well, thank you. It's been a busy period, some international travel. And some of the thinking I picked up in Paris, where I was at the Unleash conference.
Yeah.
I'll certainly come through in our discussion today. AI, Gen AI.
I'm sure every session.
But that was really, really good. Some really good sessions, good speakers. And then we have an international business in India, so in Hyderabad for 2 weeks, just working with a team there on some heavy lifting to be done.
Tell everyone a little bit about your role, because you have quite a unique role, responsibility as well, and just break that down for everyone.
Yeah, the title's a bit misleading,
Yes, yeah.
But also a bit of a hint at what I do. So I'm part of the HR exec. I report into the CHRO, Sharon Doherty. We are at Lloyds Banking Group, we're in a large-scale, multi-year digital transformation, one of the largest in financial services. If we then break that down into the HR space, this is where my role is probably key. I'm responsible, at the macro level, I'm responsible for ensuring our colleague experience is fully integrated, digital. We enable all the emerging technologies, so AI, and we'll talk about that a bit later, I'm sure. Gen AI is what we're going to introduce in December. But ultimately, it's about having a comprehensive end-to-end, very modern digital colleague experience across the bank for all our colleagues. And there are three component parts. One would be HR operations, so big focus on making it almost zero touch where we can, with huge amounts of automation. The other bit is I also look after what's called a conduct team. So any issues, concerns that come out of our branch and network, etc. We have over 65,000 colleagues. We help our colleagues through that, from wellness to absenteeism. And then I manage what's called the people platform, which is a fairly recent capability, 2.5 years in. So we have across the bank multiple platforms. I look after the people platform, which is essentially a combination of our tech, change, process, colleague journey capability in an agile capability. So I'm really quite fortunate in that space, and that gives us a great agility in the market as we face off to our colleagues. We have a backlog into 2026, for example, but that's the capability we in place. So very agile.
Does that include people analytics as well?
Sorry?
Does that include people analytics when you mentioned the technology?
We've got a little bit of it. It's still the people. Truthfully, our people analytics capability is emerging. So in the HR ops space is where I'm building it. We also have what we call the data hub. So there's one of my colleagues manages that for various reasons, but we pull on that as well.
Yeah.
So it's an end-to-end capability, and we're growing that out.
Was the team intentional about making sure that you look after those three areas? Because I think it's really important, because many companies, they're quite disconnected. Those three areas that you outlined, the fact that you oversee all of them, is that intentional by you and the team?
It's by design, yes. So the platform's been an incredibly powerful capability. As I said, it allows us to build a backlog of tech and transformative change. We no longer have change managers, for example. We no longer have
Really?
program managers. No, in an agile way, we have at the one level down in the platform. We have a business platform lead, very senior individual. We have a technology platform lead, very senior individual, and they work collaboratively on the tech and change. We have labs, we have lab leaders, we have product owners, we have customer journey managers. So we've embedded design thinking in that capability. So fundamentally different.
So a big culture change as well.
Yep. So in some cases, we've managed to upskill and cross-skill sort of traditional tech and change people. But truthfully, we've also had to bring in quite a few external individuals who have a very different background and mindset. So that's come through quite strongly. So in the platform space, about 350 colleagues in that space. Half of them have been in the role for 12 months or less.
Wow.
Some of that external, some of them bringing in from other parts of the business, and some of them we've upskilled through a very rigorous assessment process. So we're doing a huge talent refresh as we head into this space.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads us to one of our questions, because one of the things that we're hearing, is AI going to take our jobs, both in HR and outside HR? You think that's a fact, or do you think it's a myth?
It's a great question. Thanks. I think it's probably somewhere in between. And the way I think about, and from what I've seen in the space in the last while, is that it's already a fundamental part of how we operate. So I make a distinction about what I call embedded AI. So most of us have smartphones. AI is there already. That's embedded in the way we work. I know people wear watches, they wear rings, they various.
Literally my watch right now.
I saw your watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the ring,
right
and the ring. There's the Aura ring, which one of the products. And that's all using AI as a way. So it's part of our personal lives in many ways, and huge advantages and benefits there. Within the workspace, exactly, very similar. I can pick many examples, but let's talk about HR. So we are using embedded HR for a good few years. In Lloyds, we went on to Workday as our cloud solution in 2018, and we've continued to expand that. We have ServiceNow, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. We have Microsoft and all the Viva products. So embedded AI has been part of what we do for a long time, and for a good few years. And
is that, just to be clear for the audience though, that's not generative AI?
Not yet. That's AI.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, because that you mean that may be obvious to us, but I think to the audience maybe it can be a bit confusing. When talking about AI has been around for a long while, but then we're talking about generative AI. Just share the distinction.
It's a good clarification, and I'll come to that in a sec. But the point is, AI has been there and it's doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
On the Gen AI space, which is more so 2.5 years commercially available, although technology has been around for a while. That I think is going to have a much more transformative impact on work. And I think in that space, it will certainly take over multiple activities of work that's been done by humans today. And I don't think it's going to take over people's roles. So we are using it quite extensively. We do case summarization. We generate various documents, etc., using the Gen AI capability. So that's playing into that space more and more. So it will fundamentally either change or completely take over activities and tasks that people are performing. The upside or the flip side to that, though, is it will force us as a workforce, as individuals, as humans, to play in a different space. So Gen AI is not creative. Some may debate that, but it doesn't have a creative capability. It struggles with empathy. So I think it will unleash and force us to be much more focused on creativity, collaboration, human interaction, some more innovative ideas, etc., which we continue to leverage Gen AI to help us drive that. But I think that's the space we're going to play in. So fundamentally, I don't think it will take over jobs, and we will all be in a sort of catastrophic situation for that reason. And then I kind of think a little bit broader about it. The social demographics are there. So we have an aging population. We simply have too few individuals coming through. Yep. So that's going to be a help us quite a bit. And then we have a global skills deficit. We have a global skills deficit, and get into more of that if you'd like. But essentially, we're not going to hire ourselves out of this challenge we're facing today at a workforce and an HR level. So I think it will change the way we operate. Will change the work we do. but I don't think it's going to become a bit of a dystopian environment.
I love your point, by the way, about the creative side. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. I think now you can code using generative AI. You can, finance is pretty much taken care of in most cases. It can do a lot of the finance work. So it's really like when you kind of a lot of the analytical skills, and then when you look back, it's like, okay, now really, it's the creative piece becomes just that more important. As well. Yes, you can create stuff with the platform, but again, you have to have a creative mind to be able to do that. One of my worries and concerns is because you have all of these tools, is that going to eat away at creativity? Right? Because I can just write a prompt and create a video or a picture or a piece of art. That's a different set of skills of what it takes to paint a portrait or draw a picture. Does that make sense? As well. So I'm like, when maybe the new generation, for example, when I used to have to write a script for the show or write a video script for something I'm thinking about, because I had a blank slate. I didn't have generative AI, so it's in the process of me writing that I learned a lot about myself. I developed those skills, right? If that makes sense, to storytelling. But now with ChatGPT, you don't have to do that. You just say, hey, write me a story around XYZ. Boom. You've not had to go through the creative process in your mind, if that makes sense, to bring that to life. So I'm worried about how that's going to impact.
And I'm going to add insights to that, if you don't mind. So I think from a creative perspective, it's going to be a challenge. My thoughts are slightly different. I think we'll have to engage different parts of our brains and to be be creative in a different way. I think there'll always be people like yourselves and others who are, artists who watercolor sketch, and they will create something unique and specific. And there'll be others who are probably in the space already, or as younger generations, for them this will just be part of how they operate. So where they're going to have to think of what's the creative prompt. Be creative on what's the prompt. Creative prompt. We get into the space about writing an essay or writing doing a piece of technology. I mean, do we really think that? So I think we're going to be much more. We need to be much more creative on the code that we write to get a different result.
Mm-hmm.
And then my thought around insights. I think we will have to really amplify our ability as humans to really see trends and insights and say, well, actually, this is something unique I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
The other space around creativity, if you go through the medical field, for example, we are looking at and generating cures for so many illnesses at a rapid pace. Great. For me, that's the cure. Then the insight is how do we apply it? How do we take it to a global audience, etc. I think there are other spaces that are probably more creative that we haven't had a chance to play in before. In the artistic space, there are various things you can do as well. Yeah. So I it's a good point. I mean, slight tangent, if you don't mind. I do have a slight concern, which I'm sure we'll find an answer for as well. And that is, over time, as Gen AI becomes more prevalent in our lives, completes the tasks and activities we've just spoken about, will we get to a place where some work is pretty dull and boring?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's part of it. It's true.
Yeah, and then what do we do? Because we're not going to get free time. I don't know the answer to that one yet, if I'm absolutely honest. But there's a part of me which believes in human nature and creativity, and I think we'll find the answer in that space.
Yeah, because I think it's within that exploration that keeps me engaged and excited, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When it's just sort of given to me after a quick prompt, it feels very transactional and boring to your point. To your point. So it's going to be interesting. We're so early in it now, but like for me, it's a day-to-day activity. Even just before we sat down here, I ran some of the questions through a agent that I built, and to give me some feedback on anything else we should be asking. So like for me, it's just part of my flow of work already. But I still take time to not use ChatGPT as well, and actually just sort of ideate, write literally on a piece of paper and write stuff down, because I want to keep that creative juice going and don't want to just put all of it into my agent, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to find a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I heard someone. I was fortunate enough to be in a session last week with Lord Holmes, who's really
Hmm.
a huge proponent of getting a regulatory framework in place for AI and Gen AI in the UK. And he made a comment which I kind of think about right now, which is that it's a bit like electricity came along. It's a bit like the railways came along.
Hmm.
Only 40 years ago, World Wide Web came along somewhere in that spot. And those were all really, really massive transformative changes to society. And yes, we left some things behind, but we've really gained so much more. And I think
100%.
we're in that early phase there. So there's an optimistic part of me which
Yeah,
thinks
we had
we'll
the
get.
same thing, right? When the internet came along, everyone's losing their jobs, right? It was the same.
Yeah,
It was the same thing.
same hype.
On the skills piece, how do you think this is going to change HR operating models, and what are some of the skills that HR leaders need in this sort of post AI world?
Um, there are probably multiple parts to that question. If you don't mind, I'll try and break it down.
Yeah, sure.
If I go off on a tangent, pull me back. So my first thought is, as we've just been talking, I'm really excited to be at a sort of phase in our in sort of way of work where we can actually reimagine how we do work. By which I mean, if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, we did process engineering, and then before that was Lean Six. There were lots of ways where we really, in my mind, we were just tweaking it and doing things a different way. I think the value and the beauty of generative AI is that it allows us to kind of step back and reimagine how we do work, where we do work, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, there's a interesting point in the way, in sort of world of work, where this is going to be transformative. So I'm excited about the opportunity to reimagine work. So that's kind of my first point. And then to answer your question a bit more specifically, what does it mean from an HR op model and HR perspective? So an op model perspective, I think all the thinking and way we set up over the last 20, 30, 40, 60 years for the industrial age and even for the knowledge age, we're going to have to question, and that's going to move away.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break it down to a much more specific example. We are at Lloyds we're introducing next month generative AI across all our colleague experiences. So as you interact with us, we'll have a Gen AI capability. And in support of that, we've moved away from the traditional way of setting up a contact center capability. We have far fewer people in that space. We are targeting over 80% of queries coming in to be answered by the virtual agent. We are building some empathetic capability so that the response is there. We are looking at when a colleague enters a prompt, if they have a search capability, if there are certain keywords where we believe we need to intervene, we will triage that immediately to a human agent. And so there's some, emotional. Someone has
well-being, for example.
A well-being one,
yeah.
or I'm not feeling too good today, or how do I deal with depression? So we've identified some keywords, and we'll continue building that. We triage that immediately, but the rest of it, we think we've got a high deflection rate in place, and that's how we're moving. And so the skills I now need in that contact center capability is very different. We don't take calls. It's live chat. Calls are very small. I need individuals who can look at all the queries coming through in a day, build their own workflows in the flow, not go to IT and wait for time. You can look literally in the moment. You can look at what the workflow issues are. I can build my own workflow that allows me to say, well, actually, I see there's a trend. There's a frequent asked question about what's the impact of the legislation changes, which was announced in the budget this morning. I'll make this up. We can have some frequent asked questions. That's fairly bog standard. But if I notice a trend in the queries coming through, I can build a workflow that says, actually, Chris, this is the impact of it. Here's a scenario from a tax perspective. Here's a scenario from your benefits perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes highly personalized journey for you to really understand within a day or two what the implications are for you in that workspace. That's a very different skill set, operating model, and capability.
Yeah, that skill didn't exist in the function before.
That's four. So then I'll go down to a few more specific skills that I see we need, which is sort of...
How do you define that as a skill, though?
So today we don't have people sitting in a contact center tracking all those queries coming through. And then having the ability, because we've got low code, no code, and we've got automated workflows to build those workflows. So that's a very different skill.
Yeah.
That would have been, written down. We've had 2 workshops, and 3 months later, pass it on, then got it happens in the moment. And I'll answer your question in a slightly different way. So if you had said to me 18 months ago, within the HR operational space, I will probably need people who are pretty skilled at prompt engineering. Didn't know the term. What does it mean? What are you talking about? Surely that's an IT skill. Whereas today, as I set up, as I mentioned earlier, we will have people who will need to understand prompt engineering capability. They will need to be able to build some automated workflows. And let's be clear, it's almost click and drag. It's very
it should
automated.
Be. Now it is.
Yeah. But building workflows
still have to have the. You still have to understand it in order to create the workflows, right?
And that's a very different profile than if I'd hired, set it up sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago. One of the other things that we're doing, and I've gone a bit broad on this, we are bringing product ownership of colleague-facing products into the operations center. One example, and there are many others, but one we are using is the Viva product suite.
Mm-hmm.
We deployed Viva Learning into our colleague environment earlier this year. And the updates, upgrades, changes, small tweaks, functions, and features to make it even more personalized, we will own within the HR space, because the tool itself is that intuitive. And we wouldn't want to have to go back into IT and the IT shop go into their backlog and get it all done. We will build that capability internally within HR operations to make small configurable changes with huge guardrails in place, sort of on the go. So we'll have small, within a week we can have 20 or 30 small tweaks to the learning platform, which we wouldn't have done a year or 2 ago. And that's a very different skill set. I need to understand the product. I need to understand the implications of making a change, et cetera, et cetera. So those are very different skills and capabilities that we're seeing in our operations as we go. And then the final example, we are also moving on to a cloud-based payroll solution. So we've lagged a little bit in that space. Early next year, we'll be on a fully end-to-end cloud solution. And the capabilities I need to manage the run of the payroll operation is very different. I don't need people now to do checks of spreadsheets. We're moving from 7 payroll solutions into 1.
Wow.
And so the capability I need...
How long has that taken?
We started October last year.
Okay, that's pretty good.
So pretty good. So we'll be live, fingers crossed, in February next year. So that's pretty good. But again, I don't need a large number of people. I don't need people, who you do it with manual checks, balances, etc. They need to read the technology and move to more insights.
What did you say earlier? The percentage of all of this then of people that you're upskilling versus new?
So in my part of the world, we have managed to upskill and cross-skill 49% of the team in the last 12 months.
Nice. That makes sense. One of the things I'm hearing from this, which I think is really important for the audience to take away, is you can't just add generative AI to the current HR operating model. And that's what I'm seeing companies do and expect that to work. You completely reimagined that. And everything you said, I kind of took away. You've got speed.
Yeah.
You've got agility with all of those. And in order to do that, you've had to start from scratch almost, right? Yeah. And kind of completely reimagine, again, the old industrial
revolution
model that came in is not going to, what Marshall Gold says, what got you here won't get you there. But I'm seeing so many companies make that mistake where they're just sort of adding this technology to an old, outdated HR operating model, and they're like, why are we stuck?
Yeah.
Right? Why can't we move? And you've done 2 things. You've kind of reimagined that and built that out, obviously with different partners. And you've also had to go through the upskilling and reskilling. And there's no easy way of doing either one of those.
Yeah.
I want to touch on the rollout of generative AI, because there's not many companies that are in the position that you are
in the HR space.
What vendor are you doing that with?
We're using ServiceNow. Yeah, and their tool.
And that's for the agent that you're rolling out.
Yeah. Yeah. I can talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to, because
Yep.
there's not many companies that have that level of AI maturity that are rolling it out. Many are in the conversation as well. And this isn't a plug for ServiceNow, but why ServiceNow? And talk me through the process you had to go through internally, because even with Atlas Copilot, our own HR Copilot we're building, we're seeing that internally it's a challenge to navigate in terms of getting the right stakeholders involved, the right buy-in, the IT security implications. Talk me through how you kind of navigated that, and then we'll talk a bit more about the rollout.
Yes. So let's talk about product choice firstly.
Because there's a challenge for our audience. Honestly, they're inundated. Every one of their vendors. I was speaking to, I can't say the name.
Yeah.
A CHRO of a very big company, because he would tell me off if I said his name. And he was like, Chris, if I wanted to tomorrow, I could turn on 7 agents.
Yep.
Because every single one of my vendors has an agent now, right? And now it's have to be very conscious about how we make that choice. And that's a big challenge. So I'd love you to speak to that.
Oh, absolutely. Now I face the same challenge. Even though we've made the product decision, we still get, everyone wanting to, tell us that theirs is slightly better, different, etc. So I take the challenge, and it's a strategic choice, really. So let me tell you our scenario, and hopefully others can learn from this, or, help with their thinking. So first and foremost, our system of record is Workday. And that's and we're in a very fortunate position to have that as our system of record, and that's end to end. We use all the extensions, etc. The rationale around the choice for ServiceNow's tool, the Gen AI capability, was driven mostly because we've got some of the virtual agents in use in various parts of the HR function.
Okay.
But it's sort of here and there, quite fragmented. So we have a sense of it, and we started using it, sort of piloting some of its capability earlier this year. The second big reason was, as part of our enterprise agreement, we use ServiceNow as a tool across the enterprise, so that gives us commercial leverage. It gives us a different relationship with ServiceNow from that perspective. So that's been a big plus for us. Some of the other rationale has been, if you play with well-known vendors who have a global reach, or at least a regional reach, especially with this new technology, it gives you some level of confidence. So some of the built-in elements around guardrails, access to data, where the data gets used, how it gets archived, etc., data privacy challenges. When you have a big vendor, a renowned vendor, that gives you that level of confidence. If I turn specifically to the decision around the use of the Gen AI capability, so this is the Now Assist.
What's the name, by the way? I know you can.
Now Assist is the tool. Mm-hmm. We're going to do a big reveal of the name in February.
Okay, I was trying to get exclusive.
We ran an internal. We ran an internal competition recently. We got people to sort of kind of nominate names,
that's good.
And we're at the point of making the.
And is this going to go out? Did you say earlier 80% of the employees? Did you say?
So by June next year, it will be available for all our colleagues.
Okay.
And we have 65,000 colleagues in multiple locations, including India. So that's the plan. In December, so next month, we will move out of pilot and start scaling. So we'll have a 7-month scale.
What does pilot consist of? How many people is that?
We've had about 500 people playing with the tool, building up some of the elements around large language model capability, checking for naughty questions. So we're getting people deliberately to ask questions that we are have a response to.
So you can start training the agent.
Training the agent, but also just getting our mindset right. So there's a data build. But to your earlier question, so if you have a vendor, make a choice, but having a global player gives you that reaching capability. And there's another element which I think will be useful, or certainly worth sharing. One of the things we signed up to was that we knew the Gen AI tool, Now Assist, which is the ServiceNow one, is a new product, new in the market, new in the space, being used in some other parts of functions, but certainly new in HR. So we've deliberately agreed and signed up to what I call a co-design concept. So we've said to Now Assist, let's work collaboratively on introducing this into our workforce. Don't go away into a dark cupboard and come back and say, ta-da,
it's not off the shelf.
No off the shelf stuff. Let's do this jointly. Let's work collaboratively. Let's do a bit of co-design. It builds their muscles in a different way of operating, and so it does with us. And so from our perspective, we have little to no interest in the IP. What they do with it is theirs. But we want to get to a place where the product works for us. And so that co-design, co-collaboration capabilities is proved to be incredibly helpful for us. So if I were to call out something in particular, go for the bigger player, a known player. Don't go niche, because then you really struggle. And if you can get into sort of a co-design space, that would be very, very helpful. Those would be the three or four big ticket items from my perspective.
Who needed to be involved in that decision-making process to get this over the line? Because that's, again, a challenge for our audience.
Yeah, so we're in a rather fortunate position in Lloyds in that we wanted to get into the space very early because of our large-scale digital transformation. We did an exercise this time last year into early this year, where we went around all the functions in the bank and said, this is what we want to do. What are the opportunities to leverage Gen AI in a safe, reliable, transparent, non-biased way? And then got a backlog built up. More that we could tackle. And then we went through a prioritization exercise. So this would be cross-functional with our IT organization, with our data organization. We also have in one of the first in the FS space, financial services space, to have a data and artificial intelligence committee, which is cross-functional.
No surprise. You literally cannot roll something like this out without having that.
So I represented obviously HR, or people as we call it in Lloyds. We had risk, finance. We had.
Did you bring that to the table? Did you set that up? I was always interested to know who.
We have a chief data officer, and that was
amazing.
That was his
Oh,
start.
cool. Okay, great. Not everyone has a chief data officer, but great.
So that's where the capability went. Risk, I think we had 14 different capabilities represented in terms in that.
Incredible.
Space. And that meets every month.
Once a month. So other companies call it AI Ethics Council.
Yeah.
Is it that same thing?
Similar. Data and artificial intelligence and ethics committees.
I love it.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, I'm about to say they could have made it a bit more easier. So right now.
Yeah. We learn, what's happening out of a regulation perspective. We look what's happening in the EU as a way to kind of benchmark ourselves, what other competitors are doing, and then we look internally at what we're doing.
Yeah.
So in the HR space within Lloyds, we are the second function to use Gen AI. So we're using it internally with our.
Who was first, finance or marketing?
No, it was our customer relations team.
Of course.
To help them answer clients.
Yeah,
so
that
we
makes
don't
sense.
have any client-facing.
Within your Lloyds app.
Oh,
that's amazing.
So we have we're providing Gen AI capability to be able to read a customer complaint, look what the thread is, provide them a suggestion commentary, but there's still the insight. So they don't just do a voiceover, they have to read it. So that's the first place, and then we be second. As I said earlier, the last few months we've been playing with family and friends, so in small proof of concept. And then from December, we'll start scaling.
Some people may not be aware of what ServiceNow, what content, what assets live in there that can help employees. What is it specifically with that connection with ServiceNow what can surface to help people? Because not everyone knows what that is.
Yeah. So we're going to scale, as I mentioned earlier. So there are two elements to that answer. So we'll scale to all 65,000 employees by June next year. That's the plan. So volume scale. So it gives you that volume and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Our objective is quite clear. We want to enable our colleagues to, whether they're on their phone or any other company device, be able to access HR information.
Well, break that down though.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Okay, great.
I was going to go there. And the first thing we're going to do is query management. So we have over 3,500 policies in the bank. We are 300-year-old organization, and we've built up quite a lot of collateral. So it's about being able to access highly relevant policy information in the first instance, and then we'll get that more complex. I'll talk about that in a second. But we know from some research that we've done internally, our colleagues can spend 5 to 10 minutes looking at doing search for any policy. If they're really lucky, they'll find it. If they're more lucky, they'll find the most relevant one. So what the analysis capability is going to enable us to do is provide it to you based on your role, based on your location, based on your grade, so highly personalized, and you'll find the most relevant policy content. We're also changing the way we present that content from very deep, lengthy, text-based where we stored it, to much more with icons, It takes you through hyperlinks very quickly to what you want to do, etc., etc. So it's a much more relevant, personalized experience. Our medium-term aim is to make that conversational, but let's get there when we get there. Right now, it's search-based. And then to answer your question a bit further, as we go into next year, we'll also then start doing transactions. So I can look at, I'll play through an example. I can look at what's the paternity policy.
Yeah.
And it'll tell me exactly what it is, depending on my circumstances. We will then get to the transaction bit, which is to say, actually, Chris, do you want to apply for? I see you looking it up.
Do
you want to apply for it? Yes. Do I qualify? Yep. What's the dates you want to do? You enter it in, and off you go. So then updates workday, does the workflow to your manager, and that's all done within a minute. It then will say, Chris, do you want me to populate your Outlook calendar with the dates that you're going to be off? Yes. Boom. And that's all sort of seamless. Do you want me to set up a reminder for you and your manager to a week beforehand or 2 weeks beforehand to say you need to start the transition? Yep, we'll pop a reminder in your calendar. By the way, Chris, there is a checklist for people going on paternity leave, some of which is internal to Lloyds, and some of it's from the government around some of the benefits you can apply for, etc., etc. And here's the checklist, and I'll email it to you at the end of this conversation.
I love that. So
all of that just happens, in the flow of work, and that's our long-term ambition. And then the final bit is, we're going to try and get to what we call the digital nudging concept.
Yeah, it's kind of like predictive at that point. Hey, Chris, based on what I've seen in your calendar or list, kind of nudging you a lot. It's super exciting, right? Because we're seeing the evolution from agents being kind of order takers, as it were, to then taking actions. And we've heard people say, large action models rather than large language models. So, and that's kind of where we're moving to with Atlas as well, which I think is really going to be the exciting part as well. But thank you for bringing that to life for everyone about, and I'm assuming in the future you're also going to want to integrate some of the learning, the upskilling and reskilling and learning pieces into that as well, right? Quite naturally. You don't want to have another app that they go to.
Absolutely.
And that's another concern for people. Right now I've got like 4 or 5 different apps as well. So I think that's going to be really exciting to create personalized learning at scale, which you've never been able to achieve before. And it's important to, and I'm assuming like any other agents, this can be multiple languages, etc., to meet people where they're at.
And natural language processing, etc. So yes is the short answer to all of that. I mean, you touched on a very interesting point. We are fully aware that our colleagues interact with over 80 different applications in a month. Some of them work related. So the concept of an overwhelmed employee really does is important to us, because an overwhelmed employee or colleague unproductive. They become stressed. There's a higher risk that they become disengaged in the work. And so we're trying to make sure we don't add to that by looking at this simplified concept. And so we have a bit of a mantra in the team and the work that we're doing. And that is, we will make the simple, we will automate the simple interactions. But for moments that matter, we need high empathy. We will intervene and make sure you be directed to a human for human interaction.
Yeah, that's important as well. And I'm assuming as part of that build with ServiceNow that you've included like the why, the purpose, the mission, the culture, the values into that agent, right? So I think that's important for anyone listening, that it has context. It knows who you are, it knows about the organization, knows your job, your country, etc. Then it can be more personalized. So if you're thinking, why I can do all of this with ChatGPT, you can't do all of that with ChatGPT. It's the context which means the difference to that individual to create a personalized. And that's where it gets really exciting when you can roll out your own agents. Have you heard of have you seen kind of OpenAI's roadmap where they talk about Swarm?
Yep.
Right.
Seen all of that.
So it's interesting now that it's almost like a battle amongst all of these companies, that who's going to be sort of the master agent, as it were, because now we're going to have 20 different agents, and now can we connect them all to one master agent? So there's a sort of race in the landscape now to become, Microsoft obviously is going to be one of those big ones. that integrate everything. I think they've got 80% of companies now.
Yeah.
The big Fortune 100 companies use Teams.
Yeah.
So that's kind of they kind of come up with a better name than Swarm. It's a bit.
It's a sort of doom and gloom, isn't it? Yeah,
like,
battlefield.
I know exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, if you don't mind, I'll pick up on just one of that comments, and then also on close out that particular one. Context is absolutely important, and hence the work that we're doing with the Now Assist tool.
Yes.
Which will give a very specific name. That's got some content richness for our colleagues. So when we announce it, they will relate to it immediately. But context is absolutely important, and it's one of the reasons we've kept the our data, internal. So when we talk about culture or values,
Yes.
not just a broader cultural comment, it's very much we've got four C's: care, challenge, etc. So this will all come through. Going through,
and especially when you're doing that change transformation piece. This is a great tool to help lead that transformation journey that you and the team are going through right now. And
we can change the scripts literally on the fly if we need to. If we change personnel or we tweak a bit, one of our cultural aspects. We use Viva Glint as our listening tool. So we do an annual survey, which most people do, but we also do monthly pop-ups. Will you try and surface those in the agent? Yeah. So what I was about to say that. So what happened? We haven't done it yet, but we have the results of those surveys within 12 hours. Yeah. So
need to pause there for everyone to take that in, because I remember the days of when I would give a call to a CHRO and they're like, "Chris, I'm doing our annual survey. See you in 3 months." Just right. It's like crazy. We can say that offhand. Like, we've come a long way.
We've come a long way. And it goes back to the earlier comments about how work's changed. So we have a team that's focused on that. We use Viva Glint. There are multiple other products out there, obviously. But for example, we did an annual survey which closed a few weeks ago. It closed at midnight with an 82% response rate, which was really good. By the time our senior leaders came into the office the next morning, we were able to give sort of thematic content to them and say,
wow,
this is what we're seeing, and then we build that up over the rest of the week. But within 10 days maximum, we have detailed content analysis to feed back into the organization. And this is hypothetical, but if we saw a trend that we wanted to tweak in terms of culture or values or something, we can go into the tool and make that change pretty much within 24 hours.
You can also feed those insights back into the agent and ask it for recommendations or insights and perspective, which is so interesting that you could do that. Obviously, you can do a lot of that in Glint as well, but the fact that you can put that within the agent and say, hey, based on what I've just uploaded, and ask some questions to it, like, again, that would be such a heavy lift you used to have to do. We've
also used other tools, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, to take a look at so I think we had 170, trying to get the number, I think 120,000 comments, because not all colleagues comment, but some colleagues have multiple comments. For every question, you can add a comment. So that's how it kind of works. I think it's 120,000 plus comments through our survey. We were able to use Copilot to read through that and do a summation. And that's where you get the themes. It's obviously highly anonymized.
Of course.
The usual guardrails. But that's one of the fantastic uses we've been able to do. So do the analysis, close the survey, use some of our AI capability to do thematic search and push it into a visual report.
Are you going to integrate the agent into your teams?
Open debate right now, so we'll see where we go. I mean, to your other thing about swarms, that was going to add up. I mean, the latest and greatest from some of the big agents, obviously the big service providers, is Agentic AI. So
exactly.
Swarm in a nice and a bit more gentle name. We're probably going to have to think about that in probably mid next year on how do we then start leveraging Agentic AI in a way that makes sense for us. But
maybe take a second just explain the difference for people.
So Agentic AI is a place. I'll skip the technological architectural discussion, but essentially, when you have multiple virtual agents in your ecosystem, and I'll stick to HR because that's the space I know. You have an agent responding to survey questions. You have an agent just doing general query management, etc., etc. So you have multiple agents. You then you can then build your own agent to do QA across those. So they actually work. So one agent looking after another agent, looking after another agent. The space where I think there's potential opportunity for us to play would be in the payroll space. So if you have a virtual agent helping you with running the payroll, an agent to help you check for discrepancies, a virtual agent to check that you are compliant with X, Y, and Z. Then you can have, from an agentic perspective, you can have an agent say, are they running smoothly? Are they doing the right checks? Do a bit of a Q&A, where today you probably use human intervention for that.
Yes.
But you could have an agent that kind of does the Q&A across that process for all the other agents as well. And of course, you can also feed them work. That's the beauty of it. So it can feed them work coming through. So a bit on the horizon, I must be honest. But something
We're playing around with that right now in Atlas. So we have Atlas Copilot, which is almost kind of think of that as your HR generalist.
Yeah.
Right. But then below that, we have a people analytics agent, a wellbeing agent, a DEI agent, an onboarding agent, and we're leveraging the agentic capabilities already. Yeah. And it's incredible to see them interact and talk to each other. And you're in many cases you're just interacting with Atlas.
Yeah.
But it's then kind of distributing that work to those other agents, so you don't even know, because what we don't want is like a whole list of agents to interact with. Yeah. But you can, if you want to specifically talk to our people analytics agent. We worked with around about 20 VPs of people analytics to help train it over a 3-month period and build out the capabilities, even the prompt library of specific questions, stuff like that, and we the integrations. So we're integrating with a lot of the big companies that you just mentioned actually to bring in their capabilities in there. But it's incredible now to start to see the back and forth, and our agents are already conversational. Yeah. So you're just kind of having a conversation back and forth. It still needs a bit of work. It's like it's not perfect. Yeah. But we're on a smaller scale than you. So we can.
But we learn from people like yourselves who have that agility and probably a bit bigger risk appetite. We work in a regulated environment, but that's really, really good to know. And truthfully, I don't. If we want to get the Gen AI embedded first and then work our way up there, but that's where we're going. And if you don't mind me taking you back to sort of one of your earlier questions about what are the different skills and capabilities you'll need. Yeah. In my world, that will be in HR, the stuff you've just articulated, because I need to understand payroll, and I need to understand if I have a query around compensation, it's not just an IT question, and not don't need a technology.
It's a very unique set of skills. That is, it's like a combination of, there does need to be some expertise in the space, because otherwise, there's no context. But then you also need very technical. It's quite a And that skill set in many cases, like you mentioned, the prompt engineers, doesn't even exist. I mean, there's not enough talent. The skills, like back to your point earlier, the skill shortage. You have to start developing some of these skills internally. Yeah. Like if I had to start my career all over again right now, I'd probably be a prompt engineer. I think there's so. I think that would be my first go-to for anyone listening. If you want to, because that is such a evolving, and when you just at the beginning now talking about agentic, it's just,
like I said, I mean, it's exciting stuff.
It is
to be working in the workforce, because you can really truly reimagine work. You don't have to go, well, this is how we do it today, and therefore we need to do it slightly differently. I can sit back and look at that sort of integration of technology with work.
So just to very summarize that, we spoke about a lot. What specific HR activities do you think will be replaced by AI? Because we spoke about there's a marriage and some of those, right? We're kind of leveraging, but what are some of the HR functions or activities do you think will be eliminated, replaced?
Yes, and these aren't HR specific, but I'll give you some examples that I see coming through. So I think the world knows in any function, but let's stick to HR. There's an army of people producing PowerPoint slides. So that
I still can't believe that. But all right, okay.
We still have small little armies producing PowerPoint slides. I think that will fall away definitely. Some of the tasks where case summarization or meeting summarization, where we still have people.
That's already gone.
That's already gone. But we still have people doing that. But you do that. I think that will fall away. If I'll give you another example, where we do conduct cases, where we do assessment of people when they've been harassed or some particular colleague conduct issue. We now are using case summarization in those conversations. And what that means is I need fewer people in the room. But secondly, if I'm interviewing you for in a case context, I can really pay attention to you as an individual. I can display more natural empathy because I'm listening, I'm watching you, rather than sort of making physical notes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I have fewer people in my context there. We start to see digital learning buddies come through as well. So the conversations around, three of us need to have a workshop and then tell me what the learning content is, that kind of falls away. And I can go on and on. The other big area where we've seen some real pioneering stuff is what I call learning content development.
Yeah.
So you could literally, between the two of us, within the next hour, we can create a highly visual, very relevant, context-sensitive learning program within the next hour with the tech. Whereas that would have taken months and months and months, multiple iterations.
And then you got to create it in multiple languages.
Yeah,
that's one of our biggest focuses for next year. Is we're launching our learning pathways.
Yeah.
So Guillermo Miranda, my co-founder, is the former chief learning officer at IBM and Boeing. And when we first launched Atlas, he was like, the very first thing he was wanting to solve for the thing that gave him the biggest headache was we want to move away from static content to dynamic learning.
Yeah.
Customizable at scale.
Yep.
And now we've kind of built the foundation of the models inside of Atlas, and the AI kind of fills in the blocks.
Yeah.
So now you within the second, I can say, I want to upskill on X, Y, Z, and then the AI can grab the different resources and content and create me the learning pathway. All right, specifically to Chris, meets me where I'm at. I can say, I only want to do a video. I only want to do audio, right? And we played around with it. This isn't live yet, but we're close. That almost something was like a dream, like a few years ago, and now I can say actually make it this language. Right,
and if you take it to a large audience, maybe 100 people, you have immediate feedback.
Yes.
So at the end of that session, they 100%. Go, this 0.5 I didn't do, or the assessment, you've built in some online assessment capability, it'll come back to you immediately, and you go back into the studio.
Yeah.
Make some tweaks and then send it back out within.
Well, they can even ask themselves. So we have to be a little bit careful. There are some guardrails, but one of the features is that, say if you're on a particular module and you feel like you want to learn more, you can say, I want to learn more about this, and it will just add more content for that specific module and go a bit deeper for you, and then before you continue to the next, and then maybe the next. We've all done these online courses where one of the 6 modules are very boring and isn't really, skip that one, double down more on this one, and then it shows you all of the different resources of where you're pulling the information from. So you're not just taking the course, but you also understand that, okay, that came from here, that came from our service now. It pulled that in to give me context, right? As well. So all of a sudden, what would take you months of grabbing like those different resources, whether it's practitioner benchmark data, whether it's stuff from McKinsey and Gartner, your policies, you can wrap that all in one learning pathway that normally would be like talking about replacing people would be a manual lift from the team as well.
Absolutely. We can go to various spaces. The one others that spring to mind. So learning content designers is one we've just chatted about. If you're in the recruitment space, do I have to create JDs, job descriptions for all these roles? No, it gets done. I tweak it, make it content sensitive or content rich. So, that sort of space is gone. How I post for roles, how I do assessment. So from the time I want to do workforce planning through the entire HR life cycle, any of those activities will be fundamentally changed. Argument.
I think we can keep talking forever. I feel like this was never going to be a half an hour conversation, was it? We're kidding ourselves if we thought we could get through this in half an hour. Last question. First of all, thank you for coming in. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, and congratulations to you and the team on where you've got so far. That's no small feat, and I know that personally because I speak to your peers every single day. So congratulations on the steps that you've taken so far, and obviously we wish you all the best with the rollout. As we look to 2025, what are you most excited about?
So thanks for that, and I'll share it with the team. It's a team effort. 2025, you can be a pessimist or an optimist. I tend to be an optimist by nature. So there's some other big ticket items happening across the pond, and I think that will influence the geopolitical situation. But let's bank that. More specific to work, I think we're going to, ramp up the Gen AI capability. And I fundamentally believe there's some huge opportunities that we will stumble across, and we'll be pleasantly surprised as long as we're open to it, as long as we do it with the right guardrails, with the transparency that's needed in this space. We are mindful of bias, etc. But I think we are smart enough as a human race to be aware of that. So I think the opportunities are infinite, and we will discover them as we go along next year. The other one I'm also very excited about, as I mentioned earlier, is the chance to really reimagine work that comes along sort of once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
So really want to dig into that space and focus on that. The other thing what I think will also come through next year is a bit of work on what I call closing the digital divide. So we are at risk of becoming almost digital elites in some spaces, leaving lots of people behind where access is still a challenge. And so I'm really keen, and I'm hoping that we can spend a bit of time about closing that digital divide, whether it's across social mobility, whether it's from a gender perspective, whether it's from a access through geographic location. That's a space I think I'd like to play in more, and we'll see some more focus on that, because it's the right thing to do. But also, the more you can tap into that capability to a larger part of the population, again, the opportunities are phenomenal. So I think that's going to be something that we'll play in 2025. In the technology space, I think we'll continue to have a drumbeat about Gen AI in other functions, and then Agentic AI. Everyone's going to try and sell that at the lowest common price. So let's take that as we see it come through. And I think HR is again at the front of that race in some cases. So I'm glad that we have a bit more of a pioneering role than perhaps in previous generations.
100%. I think it's incredible to see many HR leaders take the lead on this and be leading it, as opposed to the whole seat at the table. If you're still having that conversation, I don't know what you're doing at this point. But listen,
wrong conversation.
The wrong conversation. Yeah. Exciting times ahead. Super excited to see the energy and the passion that you're bringing to it. Clearly, you're in the right space as well. And I wish you and the team all the best until we next speak. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.